afternoon, everyone. I've got the after lunch slump time slot here, so I'm gonna talk at you for a little bit, and then we'll open things up. I have a couple of things where we'll be able to sort of talk together at the end, and then I'm of course happy to answer any and all of your questions. You'll forgive me if I sit during my talk. My husband made me promise that I would sit down while I was doing this, so it's a little unusual, but I think this is a tall enough chair. It's sort of replacing how tall I would be if I was standing, so we're okay. All right, before I begin, I wanted to just explain who I am and why you're hearing from me on this topic. My name is Mueller. I'm one of the four, Dr. Reynolds mentioned this earlier, I'm one of the four founding employees of St. Constantine. I've had the privilege to participate in the formation of this school from the ground up. I'm sure someone has said that to you today. When we started the school, our donors gave us a year of planning where we didn't have to start a school immediately and run school with students, which meant we were funded for a year to really dig into every element of what we thought a school should be like. We weren't looking to reinvent the wheel. That's not what classical education is about. It's not about finding a new way of doing things. We were concerned with making sure that not only in academic areas were we thinking really hard about what the school experience was like for your students. So one of the areas that I was fortunate enough to sort of get put in charge of early on was deciding what the outdoor spaces on our campus would be like, and then how we were going to expect students to use those outdoor spaces. Essentially how we would approach encouraging play on our campus for our students. I was able to enroll in the Outdoor Learning Environment Certification course at NC State. That was something that I completed a few years ago. It's taught by landscape architects whose specialty is creating healthy, beautiful, natural environments for children of all ages, including high school students. I've learned a lot with that program. NC State is actually hosts like the premier program for landscape architecture that for child-based design for outdoor spaces. It's called the Natural Learning Institute. And fortunately, we were able to hire them as our landscape architects. So you heard mention of North Campus, this building, this giant property really right across the street. One of the things that's most exciting about it is it has a bunch of boring old blacktop, which if we end up with a campus over there, we're going to be able to rip up and put in some outdoor environments that are even more particularly suited for some of our older students, which we're really excited about. But it's also a lot of improvements on our current campus. We've done a lot. We're proud of our campus. There's in fact an argument for just sort of letting it be what it is and seeing what the children come up with to do, because boredom is the best breeding ground for creativity, but they're never bored over there already. But we have some really exciting opportunities to keep developing and improving the outdoor spaces on that other campus, and that's going on right now. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So now I'm in partnership with NLI, kind of spearheading that project in improving our outdoor spaces, and like I said, I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But before all that official stuff, I know that's probably why I'm here talking to you, but also about 25 years ago, I was a knee-scraped, callous-palmed, scrappy kid whose mom had to wash her socks twice to get all the dirt out. I grew up tearing around an apartment complex on a bike or rollerblades. We hid in trees. We attempted to dig tunnels to China in the front yard. I thought I could run as fast as the wind. I thought I could leap moderately sized shrubs in a single bound, and I thought I was going to be a gymnast until at age 10 I outgrew my idol, Shannon Mueller, crushing my dreams. So while the professional experience in the area of outdoor play is really why I'm here, I think it's that girl with the dirty socks who has the experiences that get me excited about talking about this. So without getting too corny, the child that I was is appealing to the child that you were. We all squished mud in our hands until it came out of the cracks in our fingers. We all got splinters under our fingernails. We all watched the flush of a purple bruise spread over our knees as children. We've all vaulted off of swings. We've spun around in circles till we collapsed in the grass. That part of us that lived for years and years without the adult cares that now consume our thoughts. I want that part to be involved in thinking about what I'm going to say today. We reflect as grown-ups constantly. I'm a teacher, you're a parent, I'm also a parent, but we reflect constantly on what children need, what they want, what's important for them. We seek desperately to have answers to those questions as adults, but we had answers to those questions as kids too, right? As a child, you thought about what you needed and what you wanted. Doesn't mean you were right, doesn't mean we're right now though. I want us to think about those ready answers we had as children to what was good for us and what we thought we needed. Sometimes, as an adult, it's good to think about and listen to what a child says, or doesn't say, says with their body what they need. I'm going to begin from there. It is a truth universally accepted that children ought to play, but where should they play? How often? What sort of equipment do we provide? What games do we allow them to play? How fast is too fast? How high is too high? How far is too far? These are contentious questions in our risk-averse age particularly. Before I tackle them, I want to unify us in our mutual resolve to preserve play's vital place in childhood. So I'm going to begin by discussing the critical work that play does in developing children physically, mentally, cognitively, and spiritually. The benefits children receive from prolonged play, particularly outdoor play, are really innumerable. Movements like spinning, jumping, climbing, running, these all contribute to healthy functioning organs. They contribute to vestibular development that will keep people from having vertigo in old age or falling out of their chairs at a young age. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of children are so their vestibular development is so underdeveloped that just sitting in a desk, they'll just fall out of their chair because they don't have the internal balance and stability. Their core muscles are lacking, but it's really that core, that key vestibular. So if your kid is like spinning in circles and won't stop, just make them do it somewhere safe because they actually need the spinning. Like their body is craving that for vestibular development. Anyway, little plug. I taught 2nd grade and 3rd grade, and even our kids at our school, sometimes they would just fall out of their chairs. They're shocked. You know, they're not like messing around and flopping out of their chair. They just end up on the ground and they're like, what just happened to me? So it's a sign, something's wrong. So healthy functioning organs, vestibular development, these movements develop crucial muscular and skeletal strength that prevent injuries when you're young and are going to preserve their health in old age. Imaginative play helps children develop empathy for others. They form social skills that are necessary to function within a group, and it provides respite from the pressures and expectations of the adult world. One of the things that I always think about with our kids is their lives are very scheduled, and we are full of suggestions. I tell my children the fastest way to put on their shoes. I encourage them to get out of the car quickly. Like even the little stuff that we do, adults are constantly providing feedback on how to get those things done more efficiently. Play is the spot where there should be as little as possible adults providing suggestions, interfering. They just need a break. Interacting with the natural world through outdoor play instills appreciation and love for God's creation. Despite the obvious necessity of outdoor play in childhood, the national trend, especially over the last few decades, has been to just decrease outdoor play opportunities dramatically. Our nation's schools, both public and private, continue to shorten and even eliminate recesses in favor of more strenuous academic schedules, typically a direct result of either school funding being dependent on test scores or the perceived success of a student coming from the volume of work that they're generating. Rather than increasing the quality of the educational experience, the nationwide move toward keeping students inside is causing long-term damage to our children. Even the federal government recommends that children spend a minimum of 1 hour per day in outdoor play. The daily average for an American child is 7 minutes. The epidemic of childhood obesity alone should warn us as a society that we are not providing for the health of our children. And with an alarming growth in pediatric occupational therapy intervention for even small children, it's further clear that the opportunities for extended physical exertion through play that are so crucial for childhood development, it's no longer an assumed part of the average child's experience. Doctors and specialists are seeing increasing numbers of children with underdeveloped motor and sensory skills, fine and gross motor movement abilities, poor bone and muscle density, and increased levels of anxiety and frustration that is inappropriate for how young they are. These factors, combined with increasing screen time and reliance on technology for stimulation, are creating children who are incapable of entertaining themselves, who are physically underdeveloped, and are dangerously predisposed to a wide variety of physical and mental disorders that will affect them for the rest of their lives. I'm sure we can all easily agree in the face of these realities that our children need play, and lots of it. This play must be rigorous, it must be challenging and creative if we expect it to combat the host of ills that I've just described. Unfortunately, many adults who agree with these tenets in theory are very uncomfortable with them in practice. Adults are uncomfortable with this type of play, the play that is so needed, because when it comes down to it, it involves consistent and increasing levels of risk. Most kids love danger. Anecdotally, many of us here can probably agree that many children seem to seek out dangerous situations with relish. This was actually proven in a 2007 study that was done in Norway, where researchers observed children at play, different ages, different size groups, to attempt to identify patterns in behavior and types of play that were sought out. They were observed in a number of environments to see if there were any common play behaviors that manifested. And they identified, I think it's 6 different play behaviors that occur with children no matter what, no matter where they're playing, who they're playing with, or how old they are. The study found that children tend to, 1, play with heights, particularly when there's a possibility of falling. Number 2, play with high speed, particularly uncontrollable speed, at a pace that could lead to collision with a person or object. Number 3, play with dangerous tools like sticks or rocks. Number 4, play near dangerous elements like water, fire, boulders, or machinery. Number 5, engage in rough play with each other like wrestling or play fighting. 6, play where children disappear or get lost by wandering away or hiding from a group. Does that sound like the children you know? So we have to ask the question, what is so attractive about those 6 play behaviors? It turns out they all have something in common. They all involve risk. We all take risks in our daily lives because we understand that risks have positive outcomes. Asking your boss for a raise is a risk. So is hitting the snooze button one more time when your alarm goes off in the morning, traveling to a foreign country, running a red light, proposing to your girlfriend. When adults take these risks, we recognize negative outcomes are possible. But we choose to take a chance anyway because the potential benefit is so appealing. We perceive the benefit and are willing to take the risk as a result. When people consider taking a particular action by identifying and weighing outcomes, they are practicing risk assessment. This is a skill that adults use constantly, but it's one that we start developing way before we grow up. We develop it when we grow up if we're given the opportunity. Adults are increasingly depriving children of this exact thing. This key part of development for children is needed, but we're taking away the possibility of risk because where they're working this out is in play. When the stakes are low, taking risks has benefits that far outweigh potential consequences. That's why allowing risk assessment on the playground specifically is such an important opportunity to give students the time and space they need to explore their own abilities and their own limitations. Some kids are fearless and need to take risks in order to learn through failure what they can and can't handle. Some children are fearful and need to take risks in order to build confidence and discover that they are stronger, faster, or more able than they thought. Practicing risk assessment is the healthy way for both of these types of children to learn, even though they have opposite attitudes toward play. Developing new skills like balancing on a beam, jumping from tree stump to tree stump, climbing a rope ladder can take time and sometimes require failure. This means scrapes, bruises, cuts, sprains, broken bones. But kids' bodies are very resilient, and this is how they learn what their bodies are capable of and how far they can reasonably push themselves. This skill continues to pay dividends as their bodies mature and their risk management begins to translate into cognitive, social, and emotional assessment in addition to physical ones. All of those things are going on when they're outside. Children need to learn to match their skills with the demands of their environment, which can only be done by allowing them to experience risk in increasingly challenging environments. When we don't allow students to practice assessing, tackling, and overcoming risks, we think that we are protecting them from present harm. In fact, we are opening them up to more serious harm in the future because we can't control their environment all the time. Falling is how you learn how to protect yourself from falling. The sensation of being about to fall is how you learn what to do to stop yourself from falling. You can't verbally instruct a child how to shift their weight on a bicycle in the heat of the moment to keep from falling. The sensations are a necessary part of learning to prevent the injury. The risks that children choose to take do sometimes make very little sense to us adults. Perhaps because we've forgotten what it's like to be a child, or because we haven't played in a long time, we watch children struggle to climb a tree, and we tell them to stop, because to us, the risk has no positive possible outcomes. What, now you're in the tree? I'm more concerned about you ending up on the ground. The negative outcome is clear. They could fall, they could get hurt. What is the benefit of climbing a tree, we ask ourselves? Surely whatever it is, it can't be worth this risk. But this is the governing principle of play. Humans are motivated to play for the sheer pleasure of it. We were made this way. It's a good unto itself with no incidental benefits required to make it worthwhile, though as we've discussed, there are many. Play must be deeply fun. I can use fancier words like engaging and facilitating social interaction for increased creative imaginative development, but it's just fun. To a child, a tree should be climbed because of the pleasure of being in the branches. This is what makes the risk of falling worth it. And there's nothing wrong with that, even if we don't exactly understand it anymore. For all the ways that I may disagree with this particular branch of scientific theory, even evolutionary biologists agree with me that play for its own sake is a vital human enterprise. In his academic report, The Importance of Play, Dr. David Whitebread of Cambridge University says, "Play in all its rich variety is one of the highest achievements of the human species, alongside language, culture, and technology." Of course, from his perspective, those are things that we've developed that discern us from the other beasts, right? That's what makes us uniquely the Lord of creation. The play is the thing that helps to make us different than the chimpanzees, for example. This conclusion is drawn in this report because Dr. Whitebread believes the complex ways that humans play has contributed to the advances of mankind beyond the abilities of other species. I disagree with his conclusion. It's still compelling that even the most pragmatic scientific attitudes toward human activity can firmly hold that the free, wild play of children in childhood is an indispensable part of the human experience. Before I go on, I want to identify something. A risk is different than a hazard. There's a host of play theorists and researchers that use these definitions for these two distinct terms. A risk is a situation in which there is an unknown outcome that could be either beneficial or harmful. A hazard in this terminology is a source of harm that cannot be reasonably assessed or accounted for by the child. I could sprain my ankle when I play soccer at school. That's a risk. It's worth it to me because of the benefit of enjoying a soccer game. But if I step on broken glass on the field at school during a soccer game, I'm the victim of a hazard. I shouldn't have to be looking for glass while I run around in the field at school. I'm going to give you some examples of playground hazards. These are common things that students should not have to worry about when they're playing, and this is not the kind of stuff, we're not like leaving booby traps out there being like, figure it out, kids. So this is a list of things that should not be on our playground environment, and these are things that as the adults who are running the school, we strive to eliminate from the playground. Hard surfaces under equipment, inadequate fall zones, lack of maintenance, broken equipment. You probably see this when you take your kids to the park. This is the Parks Department spends all their time trying to keep this from happening. Inadequate supervision, this is a hazard. Pinch points, sharp edges. I don't know if any of you ever went down a slide that had rivets on it. They don't make those anymore. Pinch points, not good. Protrusions, tangling hazards, overcrowded play areas, and contamination with dangerous items like broken glass. Through planning, implementation, and maintenance, it's possible to provide children a reasonably hazard-free play environment that still provides plenty of opportunity for risk. And that's the responsibility of adults, and that's our commitment to you as the teachers who run the school. We've worked very hard to eliminate hazards on the natural playground here at St. Constantine. We have fall zones. Our slide is built into a hill, and you can't fall off of it because it's built into a hill. Our equipment is regularly checked for structural integrity. That includes arborists coming out to make sure all the tree limbs are healthy. We stick to mostly natural materials in the constructed elements of our playground, which means we're avoiding many of the dangers that largely plastic or metal equipment can provide. Supervision is actually the key #1 factor in our play strategy at school, so there's always lots of adults watching, and our students have about 3 acres to spread out, which means we aren't having too many issues with overcrowding. As far as providing opportunities to practice risk assessment goes, when we were deciding as a school how we wanted to approach outdoor play, we tried to keep all of this in mind. So we set out to create an environment where students could interact with the natural world, challenge themselves physically, and take risks appropriate for their age and ability. We wanted to create something that was harmonious with nature, that left play open-ended so that the students wouldn't get bored easily. This is how we ended up with a natural playground. I want to very quickly talk about sort of the evolution of play equipment it's kind of globally actually. So in the early 1900s, I'm sure you've seen these before, like Germans and Swiss people got really into like fitness with rings and bars and things, and there were all those people in like uniform leotards, you know, swinging around. So that was the first play equipment, but it was built for adult fitness. And then people started saying, oh, we could put some of those things out for kids outside. Before that, if you went to a park, this is still true in Europe, right? If you go to a park, what's at a park? Like trees, bushes, a walkway, maybe some water. It's not playground equipment, because if you were a kid, here kid, go play in that little nature environment we created, right? So the first playgrounds were sort of this adaptation of adult equipment that was made during the sort of Northern European fitness craze of the early 1900s. We put some of it outside for kids, we made it smaller, and then we started adding other kinds of things too, but it was always an experiment. We were like, well, we'll put out some slides, and we'll make a merry-go-round and all these things. And I'm sure you remember that it was still like this when I was a kid, like the scary metal merry-go-round that could go like 1,000,000 miles an hour, and like the slide with no rails that would seem to go all the way up into the sky and then plunge all the way down. So we put a bunch of like just metal stuff outside, and there were so many injuries. So many injuries, and again, this is just adults experimenting on kids. We were like, well that seemed bad. Safety. Forget about the fun bits. Safety. We're just gonna make it all for safety now. So now we have our squishy ground, and the play equipment's about this high off the ground. The slides all have bumps in them. Have you noticed that? It slows them down so the kids don't go very fast. So playground equipment is now designed with safety as the priority. In playground lingo, what you can do on a thing is called an affordance. So children will make up their own affordances if there aren't enough interesting ones provided by the equipment, and that's actually why now play equipment as it's made now is actually not as safe. It's less safe. There are more injuries on playgrounds than there ever have been before. Part of it is because the kids all have brittle bones and weak ligaments and don't know what they're doing, so they fall down and get hurt way easier than kids used to. But also, if the playground equipment is too safe, they'll find a way to make it dangerous, right? And so then they're going to find affordances that it was not built for. And if it's not built for those things, like if they decide they want to try to climb up on top of a tunnel slide, but the tunnel slide has been made very, very wide because they're trying to make sure it's very, very safe, kids can't hold on, they're going to fall off, right? You've all seen kids think of something fun to do with something they're not supposed to do it with, right? So that's kind of the evolution of play equipment. And so when it was time to install something on our campus, we decided to go the route of a natural playground. We actually installed the first natural playground in Houston. There's kind of a movement. Actually, the Houston Arboretum just opened something that's a little bit more similar to this. There's a couple of other places. There's one, I think, along one of the bayous, sort of in Midtown. There are more places like this in Houston, which is fantastic. That's how we ended up with the natural playground, essentially. It provides alternatives to the brightly colored plastic playgrounds that have been popular in the last 20 years. They make kids bored faster. Like I said, they actually cause more injuries. So we're happy with what we've done. The unique elements of a natural playground include naturalistic materials, wood, sand, rocks, tree stumps, emphasis on buried terrain. So we actually built all the hills that we have over there on our campus. We brought in dirt and put sod on them. Open-ended play features that allow children to use their imaginations more freely. We have grassy hills that are shaded with trees. We have our large tree fort. We've got a climbing wall on a rope ladder up to the tree fort. We've got a balance beam out there, a hill slide with climbing boulders and stairs, with a sand play area, the really big climbing wall, a small cave, a gazebo with the rock amphitheater, and then a bunch of different circles of stumps and boulders and things. And then obviously we have a lot of other places on campus where kids play. You may have heard your children talk about Bragdonwood, the fairy tree, the pocket prairie, the garden, and then just we have a lot of fields out there too. So there's lots of spots, using the playground lingo. There are many places with affordances that provide inventive, rigorous play that are sort of spread out all over our campus. But we're going to be adding more of them, which is exciting. We're embarking on the second phase of improving our outdoor spaces right now. So St. Constantine has contracted with the Natural Learning Institute out of NC State as the landscape architects for the total use and development of our outdoor spaces on campus. This includes more dedicated outdoor classroom space, creating more of a natural flow between the outdoors and the indoors on our campus, some more staging areas so that kids who have become muddy and dirty and covered in stuff can be cleaned off before they're brought inside, that kind of thing. And then also just some more equipment things. So, if many of you, maybe all of you, I'm not sure if Brand New Families received the survey this summer, but we did a survey with NLI during the discovery phase where we asked students and parents and teachers about the strengths and weaknesses of what we currently have outside, and then gave people the opportunity to make suggestions and provide feedback. I'm really looking forward to sharing with everyone. I think probably in about a month, the initial plans that have come out from that work so far, with the changes that we're looking forward to making. And then the work to put those improvements in place is going to start probably around the conclusion of this school year. There are swings and zip lines and all kinds of other things that are being brought up that I'm very excited about. So for the final part of my talk this afternoon, before we do a little bit of interactive stuff, I would like to give you all a glimpse of how we train our staff. If you've ever come to campus to pick up your child during a time when there are kids outside playing, it may look to you like chaos reigns and it's like total anarchy out there. It's actually not. It's a very carefully engineered environment. The kids may come home and tell you, I don't know, nobody was watching me. We hear this all the time. That's because our teachers are trained to do a very good job of letting the kids feel like they are experiencing real, actual free play, which means they're not being hovered over and chased around, but we're watching them like hawks, okay? So, as I already mentioned, close supervision is the key of making sure that our play methodology actually works. It's a key element of safety, but it's also a key element of making sure that the students are growing and developing in all these physical, social ways that we've talked about. So I'm going to basically give you the instructions that I give to our staff. Every single semester we have faculty in service, and I get up and I go over all of this, and the teachers ask a million questions. All of the instructions I'm about to tell you about should clearly line up with what I've said about our goals, which are to welcome children to experience gradual risk in every way that they can. So if we're trying to preserve an environment of truly child-driven free play, this is the teacher's role on campus. I give them a list of do's and don'ts, and I'll start with the do's and I'll do the don'ts after. So the first one is do actively walk the grounds. Let kids see you seeing them, and let them get used to the idea you are there, but you're not there to control or direct their play. This is how they can come home and tell you about things that took place during play, and there's not a grown-up named, right? That's a good thing. It's a piece of independence that we're able to give them, where we are supervising them closely, but it's not like being in the classroom where a teacher is, directing everything that you do. They really do feel like they, in an important way for their development, were alone, though they were in fact not alone at all. We tell teachers to quietly and closely observe kids who are taking risks, only intervening or talking to those students when totally necessary. So what this looks like is if there's a kid who's climbing in a tree, there's going to be a teacher standing right under the tree, just watching. Not talking, not getting involved, just watching. Making yourself available and approachable. This means, I always tell them, it's not teacher social hour. So we shouldn't go out onto the playground and see like 3 or 4 teachers standing in a circle chatting, right? Active supervision requires it's good to detox and talk to other teachers, so it's very tempting. But they need to make themselves available. That means not sticking in groups. Firmly put a stop to physical violence, inappropriate language, or interactions with inappropriate power dynamics. We end up talking about this a lot. A free play environment does not just mean anything goes, right? We'll talk about this in a minute, but part of what we're trying to provide is an environment for students to take social risks. social risks involve some kids attempting being pariahs, right? So there are going to be kids who try out cruelty. There are going to be kids who try out meanness. There are going to be kids who try out manipulation. That's good. It's bad that the kid wants to do that, but they need to do it now and get crushed by their peers so that they don't grow up into crappy adults, right? So the kid who has that impulse, we want that kid to do the thing they have an impulse to do and then feel the natural consequences. That means a teacher didn't get involved. You thought no one saw you, but the children on the playground saw you and you have a reckoning because now no one wants to play with you, right? That kind of thing, that we expect, that we allow. That is a tension that is hard for parents. Your child may come home and tell you about something mean that somebody did and then no one did anything about it. It doesn't mean no one saw it. If it's not, I'll get into this a little bit later, but we have to work really hard with faculty to understand, like there's an extent to which observing carefully students having a negative interaction with each other and the fallout from that negative interaction needs to be allowed to take place. It is a healthy environment for that to take place when they are out in the open with adults watching them. It's good to experience that kind of conflict. That kind of conflict doesn't go away when you grow up, right? So it's good for them to experience it and learn how to manage it when they're young. However, teachers are not going to tolerate physical violence. How do we determine what physical violence is? This is what we say. Is everyone having fun? It's a very simple question, but it's exactly what we need to discern the difference between rough and tumble roughhousing. So when two kids roll past me because they're scrapping on the playground, I should be able to tell I'm a grown-up. Is someone starting to get to the edge of, this was fun, but so-and-so just accidentally poked me a little too hard and now I'm getting a little hot under the collar, right? There's probably, depending on the kid, learning how to de-escalate yourself from that emotion is very healthy. It's very good. So if we can allow them to do that themselves, fantastic. But that means we're not going to intervene until we see that someone else is about to change the tone. Someone else is going to resort to physical violence. And funnily enough, because kids are young, they don't need, this is something they're learning, their sparring partner may not even know that it happened, right? I'm sure if you have kids, this happens, right? One person is like, I don't know, I thought we were playing, and then so-and-so just hit me in the head, you know? So that kind of thing, it's important for them to learn that, and so our teachers have to know how to watch very carefully and see, oh, there's the physical violence. This is now officially something where I have to come in and say, stop, break it up. Did you notice how you were feeling? When did it start? Did you notice that this person was feeling that way? And then you talk through it. There could be consequences, sending to a house head. You may hear about it from a teacher. Anyway, so we go through that with faculty as well. Inappropriate language, obviously. Name calling, profanity. These are all the kinds of things that, as a parent, I feel this as a parent. Part of me is like, oh no, now my kid heard some other, so my kid came home from pre-K and was calling everything poop head. Oh man, they learned that at school. Okay, well that's gonna happen, right? But we don't want our school to be the place where kids are teaching each other terrible stuff, right? And that includes verbal inappropriate language, things like that. And then interactions with inappropriate power dynamics. This is a really interesting one to watch for. This is the 6th grader who gets into fights with 1st graders because they feel like they're emotional peers with someone who's actually far younger than them. Usually this comes from older students who are a little bit more immature. And so they end up having inappropriate interactions, and I don't mean like sexually inappropriate or even physically violent. It can just be that they end up conflicting more closely with younger students rather than their own peer group. This is an imbalance in power dynamic. So if we're having to break up arguments between a 3rd grader and a 7th grader who are playing soccer, part of what's going on there is an inappropriate power dynamic. And so we watch very carefully. We don't want to do age segregation. We like the fact that it's a family environment. Younger kids are playing with older kids. But when those interactions are taking place, our teachers watch those especially carefully because the power imbalance between older and younger, between male and female, between the size of the physical bodies of the two people, even if they're the same age, those are things that can create situations that become uncomfortable or dangerous or unsafe or just cross into something that the child is not prepared to deal with and they need help from a grown-up. So those are other interactions we watch for very carefully. And then finally, we do wait to praise or compliment children until, maybe don't do it at all. This sounds funny. As a parent, the first time your kid is brave enough to get on the slide by themselves, you're like, yay, you're good! And you get in their face and you cheer for them. children need to feel the delight and satisfaction of their own accomplishments without seeing us approve of it. Because if we spend all our time approving and affirming achievements, they're going to try stuff. This is physically on the playground, but this applies in life, everything. They're going to try stuff that they maybe aren't ready for because they're trying to please a grown-up. So if I cheer for the kindergartner who is struggling up the really tall climbing wall, they might feel like I'm sort of goading them, like egging them on, like, come on kid, keep going, and they might push themselves to try to do something that they're actually not ready for. So it's very important for our faculty to not get involved as cheerleaders in what the kids are doing. So this means, like, you know, I tell this story all the time. I watched Elise LaRocca when she was in first grade get to the top of the climbing wall, and I had seen her working on it for weeks. She was a little bit afraid of how high she was getting. You know, as you get further and farther off the ground with gravity, you feel more and more of that resistance of, oh, I can feel that I'm up here, up really high. She got to the top. She looked around. No one said anything. I was watching her, but she didn't see that I was watching her. And she just had a moment for herself. I knew she was happy, and she came down and scurried away, and I told her mom after school. I didn't talk to Elise at all about it, and that's good. It means that Elise got to experience the rush of adrenaline and the joy in her own accomplishment without being taught to feel like a grown-up needed to know about it, if that makes sense. If a student comes, this happens a lot, we talk to teachers about this, if a student comes to us for validation after they've done something, this is normal, your kids do this, I'm sure. Mom, I finally was brave enough to climb up the tree fort today, or something like that. We praise the effort, not the outcome. So if a student comes running up to a teacher, it could be a teacher that they have and they're trying to sort of gain currency with that teacher by receiving validation from them. It could be a stranger. You know, the kid doesn't know who you are at all, you're just on playground duty, and someone just can't handle themselves. They're so excited, they come up to a teacher and say, I did blah, 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 because they're so happy. We tell them that we see that how hard they must have worked for that kind of thing. We don't say, wow, it's so great that you did that, can you do it again? You know, that kind of thing. Children's accomplishments on the playground, the effort that they put in, we praise effort, we don't praise outcomes. And then here's the don't list. Don't start or moderate games. This is really hard because we're all teachers, which means we kind of like kids. So it can be tempting to want to get involved with the kids because they're fun and it's fun. But chasing teachers, things like that is fun, but some children, I'm sure you know kids like this, they only want to talk to adults. So, because they're comfortable with grown-ups. They don't feel comfortable with their peers. So they're going to come stand next to the teacher. They might want to try to get the teacher involved in their game. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's a sign that the child actually needs to feel, okay, this isn't, you know, we teach the teachers to say, okay, you need to go play. Like, you can touch base with me, but it needs to be brief. I'm not going to let you stand by me the whole day. I'm not going to play games with you. I'm not going to say, come on, everybody, let's go play hide and seek. They need our help orienting their focus away from adults. Sometimes, some kids don't need help with that at all, but some kids do. Don't do anything a student can do. That's something else we tell the teachers. So if the students try to get you to moderate a foot race, like, can you be the finish line and tell us who won? Go grab a kid from the fringes who's not involved and say, actually, that's a perfect job for so-and-so. And make a kid do it instead. So don't do anything that a child can do on the playground. This includes, like, tie my shoe, right? So there's a discerning element here of childlike development and ability, but if the kid is trying to get something from an adult, sometimes it's because they really do need something, but sometimes it's just because they want to have a touch point with an adult, or they are lazy and don't want to do it themselves, and so we just don't do anything that a child can do. Don't suggest activities. This is the kid who comes up to you and is like, oh, I'm bored. Don't say, well, have you gone down the slide today? You can just say, yeah, well, being bored is sometimes where we get our good ideas, so just be bored for a little while, and if you want to stop being bored, try doing something different. We don't suggest activities. We don't make up blanket rules. So we don't look at kids who are doing something and say, you're not allowed to run on wet grass. This is a rule from the public school that I went to when I was a kid. Don't run on wet grass. Okay, so one teacher told them they're not allowed to run on wet grass, and the next time they go out to recess, they're running on wet grass, and one of the kids says, wait, we're not allowed to run on wet grass. So-and-so said that, and the teachers that are out there are like, I didn't say that. So we don't let teachers make up blanket rules. Specific rules in the moment are always allowed. So this is, hey, you kid, you are stealing the soccer ball and drop kicking it away from the game. Every time that you're ruining this great game of soccer, you have to go somewhere else now. That's a specific rule for a specific child in a specific situation. That happens all the time. So we help students regulate themselves. That's physical safety, that's the appropriateness of their behavior, but we don't make up blanket rules. We're not like sending an email to all the teachers being like, Jimmy is not allowed to play soccer anymore. Don't take away recess as a punishment. Recess is not earned by good behavior, just like math instruction is not earned by good behavior. Kids need to play. So if your kid does something wrong in class, we have other methods of punishment. We're not going to make them, the school I grew up at had red dots on the pavement, and you would have to go sit on a red dot during recess while everyone else went and played. Some schools still do this, and they'll have other kids who have to monitor the dot sitters to make sure they stay there. Oh, horrible. So we don't take away recess as a punishment. The only exception to that is children who cannot be trusted to remain safe. This is the kid who's like trying to tunnel out of the gate, out of school, right? The kid who is consistently running, a small child who's consistently running really far away from their teacher when they're supposed to be staying with their class. Those are the only times where we're going to take away recess. It's not a punishment. It's because we cannot trust that that child is going to be safe. Okay. And then don't prohibit behavior based on potential risk. Only stop kids from doing things based on actual present danger and ask them questions about their plans. Here's how this looks. There should be another don't on here. It should say, don't say, be careful. That's essentially what this boils down to. We as adults are running a constant stream of all the things that could happen, right? I'm this way. I'm like, oh man, this like fluorescent light thing could like fall on my head and shatter and cut me. You know, like those are the kinds of things that are going in my brain. When my kids are playing, it's the same deal. We can think of a million ways that things can go wrong. We do not need to share those with our children unless one of them could actually be a thing that is about to go wrong. So the way this works is if you see your child climbing a tree, you feel there are so many things that could go wrong. I want none of those things to happen. And the thing that comes out of your mouth is be careful. That actually doesn't tell the kid anything except that you are afraid. They haven't been helped in any way. So if your child is climbing a tree, you need to, this is what we tell the teachers to do. Think about the thing it is that you're actually worried might happen. It's not like lightning might come and strike the tree out of nowhere. Like you're not trying to warn them against that. Maybe what you're concerned about is, do they know that the further up you go, the branches get smaller and they may not support your weight anymore? If that's the thing you're actually worried about, the teacher, we would teach the teacher, this is what you say instead. Have you thought about what will happen if that branch isn't strong enough? Have you tried to see if that branch is strong? Do you have a plan for getting down? These are questions that you can ask. They have an actual answer. Be careful doesn't have an answer, right? But if you say, where is your foot going to go next? The child either has an answer and you shouldn't have been so worried. That happens a lot. Or they don't have an answer and you're going to help them learn a new thought process for when they're climbing a tree, right? This applies to anything you're watching your kid do that's dangerous, unless you straight up don't want them to do it. Like, I don't want my kid climbing onto the counters from a chair. So I'm not going to like watch very carefully and help him learn how to do that. I'm going to say, no, get down, don't do that. But I'm not going to say be careful either. But if there's something that my child, it's okay for them to be trying this, they're exploring, they're taking risks. We teach our teachers to ask questions about people's plans rather than just interfering because we don't want to deal with the fact that something bad could happen. There are some other things that we teach our teachers to do. One of the things, so I already said, is everyone's still having fun. This is something that we can say when we feel like things might be getting tense, or if we just started to observe a rough and tumble play interaction that's taking place. And usually the answer is just yes, and then they sort of roll away and they continue doing what they're doing while being monitored. The other one is sticks hit sticks. You probably have heard something about stick play from your child's at school. Sticks hit sticks. That means this is fine, sword fighting, things like that, but this is not, right? Another one, these are just sort of some practical things. You can't climb a tree in rain boots. That's because your foot flexion is inhibited by a rain boot, right? So if you want to climb trees, you got to go change out of your boots. Go put on your real shoes, then you're good to go. No props or buddies to help you get into a tree. When you're tall enough and strong enough to get in the tree by yourself, you're tall enough and strong enough to safely climb around in the tree. But if you need, your friend, or like you put a chair under the tree so that you can get up. That means that if your body is strong enough to pull yourself up, then we will trust you to be strong enough to be up there. So that's a little window into what we teach our teachers as far as how they watch the kids on the playground, and then from there we let them play. We found that supervision really is the key. We have had what we would consider like a serious injury. We have had no serious injury that took place during a moment of close supervision. So what that means is, and this is totally understandable, it's a large campus. It doesn't mean no one was watching, but it means teachers would say, oh, actually, I didn't see exactly the moment when that person, whatever it was. So like my daughter got a stick in the eye. She just fell and a stick went into her eye and we had to go get surgery anyway, here at school. But it wasn't, no one was closely observing. I know, you guys see some people grimacing. So as a parent, I think I might still have the most seriously injured child on campus, especially my own kid. So I hope that gives me some street cred with all of you, that like I'm still able to sit up here and talk about this, because the other eye actually doesn't see at all, which means if they hadn't been able to fix the eye that got skewered by the stick, she would have been completely blind, okay? So talk about like risk. Are we gonna be like, and so now every stick that falls to the ground shall be burned because sticks poke people's eyes out and blind them? No, like this isn't Sleeping Beauty. I'm not trying to get rid of all the spindle wheels or whatever. Like it's futile and it's not real, right? Potential harm is so huge. It's so big and it could come from anywhere. And there's no way for us to actually protect our children from the number of things that could go wrong. And that's very hard as a parent. It's hard to let go of that. But if we don't, we will spend it's like whack-a-mole. We will spend all of our time trying to eliminate every potential thing that could go wrong, that we're going to create a tiny, tiny box in which no risks ever take place. And that's actually going to hurt them more than allowing them to have the kind of childhood that we've talked about here today. So I wanted, let's see.
Can't do questions.
No questions? Not even one?
It's 1:59, so if it takes
1 minute
30 seconds.
Okay, I'm sorry. You can talk to me later. Well, actually, you can't. I have to go home so John can come back into his talk. You can always email me. If you have questions about something that's gone on the playground, this is very important. Remember that your child looks to you for comfort and validation. That's not bad. It's very good. But what that means is when they come home and tell you about something that happened to them, one, the way they feel about it when they talk to you is not going to be reflective of the way they felt when it happened, right? They might be tougher than you think, but they get to let down their guard with you. So they might seem more upset about something when they talk to you about it than they were when it actually happened. And that's healthy and good, right? They also want to minimize their own involvement, which is understandable. We all know our children, so that shouldn't shock any of us. Which means if you're concerned about something that's gone on the playground, social interaction, if you're concerned about something physically that took place between your student and another student, just remember, when you absolutely should reach out to the school. You can get more information. Ask your child who the grown-up is that you should talk to about that. They may know. They may be like, well, so-and-so, Mrs. Mueller saw it happen. Then I'm the right person to talk to. If you're not sure about any of that, you can always just email me, but their own teacher is usually the person that I would start with, especially if you're concerned about another student. Just keep that in mind. As you talk with your child about what goes on at school, and then communicate with the school. Okay, I just took up my question time, but does anyone actually have a question? And then I'll stop.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I had a big old long answer in case anybody wanted to talk about bullying, because that's always really scary, but we won't do that right now.
The future plan?
Yes.
We're just getting like swing and
No, there's a lot going on. NLI, there are a bunch of things that we need to do to vary our landscape. We have too much just empty green space. One of the number 6 on the list of things kids need is to be able to feel like they're alone. We're not going to create like places where kids are actually alone. Obviously, that's unsafe for a number of reasons. But what that means is we're going to be reforesting a lot of our campus. We're going to be putting in trails through a lot of the green spaces. Throughout those, suddenly you'll come into a clearing and that'll be where the swings are, if that makes sense. So we're going to be varying the terrain, adding more edible things. We've talked about, dry creek bed, creating more habitats that will attract more wildlife. And then incorporating some more of these sort of like natural playground affordances that are more specific. So, you know, swinging, lots of different kinds of ways, but there'll be more things than that as well. And then it'll be different sizes of things, especially so that there's stuff that's interesting to kids of a variety of physical abilities and ages.
What about bringing in wildlife?
Well, we have a bit of domesticated, what do you mean?
Like snakes or like lizards?
Like things
that would like to live there but maybe don't know about it.
So I think the lizards have found us. I'll just say that the lizards and the frogs know we're here. We're not. You know, I don't think we've had some dead snakes.
We've never had a live snake on campus.
Yeah, we've never had a kid be like, snake! I think we found a dead snake, but there's a red-tailed hawk who lives in our trees who leaves the remains of his
The red-tailed hawk
lunch.
is on it.
Yeah. So that's, if we find like mice, rats, it's always just pieces of them. Which the kids love. And then they have solemn burial ceremonies. It's the best.
We loved you well, half a lizard.
Yes. But yeah, I think attracting more, and that's part of the reason actually the emphasis with NLI is going to be planting things that are native to Houston, so that we'll be attracting things that are native wildlife. That's the idea. Okay, I'll stop.
Thanks.
Sorry.